Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jody Allair and I work for Birds Canada, and I'm really excited to talk about a few of my favorite topics. One of them is birds, and the other one is engaging people through citizen science programming and volunteer-based monitoring. I get really excited about these topics. And so what I'm going to do in a very efficient manner, I'm going to talk about the citizen science landscape in Canada with an emphasis on birds, talk about the different programs we run at Birds Canada, the different types of citizen science programs that we use, and I know that the Weaselhead uses as well. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, in addition to volunteer monitoring, what else we can do to be helping birds, whether that's within Calgary or anywhere else in the country. So very quickly, I've been a birder since I was a kid. Like literally when I was a kid, I was just obsessed with birds, and I still am. I've been really lucky to get to work on lots of different research programs, studying birds like bald eagles, to forest birds at risk, to running education programs and running bird observatories. And with the big theme of, I want to do whatever I can to try to help birds and understand birds a little bit more. And as I get older, that's turning into me wanting to share that with people and encourage others to start taking everyday actions to try to help birds. And one of those ways is through volunteer monitoring programs. This is clearly not a volunteer monitoring program, right? So could you just go grab that eagle? Yes, we were just about to let her go, and she was actually quite lovely. But I need to start with the why birds, right? This is the question that always comes out. It's like, okay, so like why birds? Like nature has a whole bunch of things. Biodiversity is incredibly rich. Why the emphasis on birds? And it's really simple. Like they're awesome, right? Like birds are kind of the best. And now I am also a naturalist. No one ever believes me. I always have to explain myself. Like, yeah, I'm okay, I'm a birder, but I'm also a naturalist. I like all living things. Got an awesome butterfly photo in this talk, in fact. But the birds are special, right? You can see them anywhere in the world, right? Like anywhere you go, you can find birds at any time of year. Like you can't do that with everything else, right? They're kind of magic. Like they sound incredible. They're visually stunning. They can be, incredibly captivating. And in terms of the subject matter for engaging people and to really start connecting people to the natural world, it's really hard to beat birds, right? Yes, slugs are cool. Butterflies are awesome. White bark pine, super wicked tree. But like there is something about birds, right, that can really gather that. So one of the reasons there's such an emphasis on birds with citizen science programming is that it's a great gateway subject to embrace people, for people to get their head around, before you start, get people to monitor chironomids in like rivers and stuff, right? You don't want to start there. That's phase 12 of indoctrination. Okay. So very quickly, if you're not familiar with Birds Canada, we're Canada's leading bird conservation organization. We're the BirdLife partner in Canada, and our mission is to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of birds in Canada. All right. So we're going to jump right into it. I have like 3 slides of text, and they're all right now. Okay, and then that's it. So you can just take a break after that. You don't have to worry about the reading. I wanted to sort of tell you a little bit about the landscape of citizen science or volunteer-based monitoring in the country, because I am, I think this stuff's really important, and it's important for a variety of reasons, and it is a lot more than just the data, which I'll get to in a second. So these programs help research collect vast amounts of high quality data to help understand and conserve birds. And when your research project is designed correctly and properly, the data is high or even higher quality than can be collected even by professionals, right? So if you're doing this right, you're collecting pretty important data to help monitor birds or whatever else you're monitoring. In Canada, there's sort of like some of the big bird monitoring programs are the Green Bird Survey, which is run by Environment and Climate Change Canada. Birds Canada has a little bit of a role with that as well. eBird Canada. So I help manage eBird in Canada, and that's a collaborative program with Cornell, Quebec Oiseau in Quebec, and us. Those are sort of the 2 really, really big ones. I'm going to focus in a little bit on our very specific programs and talk about the depth and breadth of these. And so starting in 1960 with the establishment of, Long Point Bird Observatory, you can only put so many words, right? Birds Canada now manages 44 volunteer or citizen science programs that engage over 74,000 people in Canada annually. So we collect a lot of data. And in fact, it's about 20 million species occurrence records are submitted each year into our Nature Counts open access database. So it's a lot. It's a lot. Now, our role as an organization is to build and manage programs that engage volunteers in the successful monitoring of Canada's birds. Super simple, right? And if you go around the world, there's lots of other organizations that do similar thing. And, we were talking about the British Trust of Ornithology earlier, the PTO. They have very similar programs in Great Britain to monitor a lot of those birds. That is what we're doing. And some of them are our own programs, some of them are collaborative. And so we look to identify gaps and collaborate with partners to ensure that we are collecting the necessary data for effective long-term population monitoring. So that's working with organizations like Environment and Climate Change Canada and other partners. Our role is to house all bird data in Canada within our Nature Counts database. And we're actually, within a year of actually accomplishing that feat, which is a lot, a lot of data. And my colleagues spent a lot of time working on that and to visually display that information on Nature Counts. A lot of good stuff coming up with that. And the other one is to create opportunities for people to build strong connections to nature through birds. I particularly like that last point. All right, so let's talk about, I've mentioned data a lot and 20 million records and all this stuff. Yes, it's a lot of data. And the data is really important. So I'm going to show two things here that go just beyond the data. One is the impact, right? And so this graph here, right? This is from the latest, from the 2019 State of Canada's Birds report. This is a report that pulls together bird data from all different programs, all different organizations to figure out what groups of birds are doing well, which groups of birds are not doing well in Canada. And there's going to be an update soon. And so just looking at here, you can see just generally the bird groups that are doing well: waterfowl, birds of prey. Okay, no surprise there. We don't have enough time to get into the details, but obviously, waterfowl, there's been a lot of emphasis on waterfowl over the years and lots of money. There are some birds that are sort of middling, but there's three groups of birds in Canada that are not doing well since 1970. And these groups form the priorities for a lot of our work now at Birds Canada, and especially our specific research projects. Shorebirds, especially high Arctic nesting shorebirds, that's about a 40% decline since 1970. Grassland birds, it's about a 57% decline since the 1970s, right, in Canada. You get mirrored results in the US as well. Okay, and especially here in Alberta, that should be very alarming. And certainly happy to talk about the grassland bird stuff a little bit more later if anyone is interested. But the big one is aerial insectivores, about 60% decline. These are the groups of birds that fly and catch insects, right? Barn swallows, chimney swifts, nighthawks, right? All of the aerial insect-eating birds are in huge decline. This is what the data is telling us right now in Canada. Not one program, but a combination of multiple data sets are showing us this. The other thing I want to show here about beyond the data is that the data is important. It tells us where to go. It shows us our priorities. But these programs, this type of data collection is also really important in another way, right? Using citizen science can be the big bridge. It can be the big connector between people in the natural world. And what ends up happening is that people participate in the programs. It becomes more than just collecting data. It's either people that are birders or bird curious and they want to find a way to give back, right? So they're participating in these programs. But it also provides an opportunity to connect people to the natural world, right? And I think one of the biggest problems we face, right, whether you're in the city of Calgary or just broadly, is that there's a real disconnect to the natural world, right? And one of the ways to build those bridges is to actually connect people. And if you sign up for an entry-level citizen science program like Project Feeder Watch, or go out on a Christmas bird count with some experts, you actually get to learn these birds and collect the data and realize like, oh wow, like not only am I learning all this stuff, but I'm actually collecting information so that scientists can try to help them. And I think that's a really, really important step, like building those connections between data collection and people. And that's the value of citizen science, right? And I think with all your programs, you probably see that and know that, right? At Weaselhead. So I'm just going to talk quickly here about the different categories, just in case you're interested. Now these are categories as defined by me, but just looking at how we are collecting data at Birds Canada, these are sort of the breakdowns of the different programs, and all have a different goal, different purpose, different outcomes. And so one of them is entry level, all right? So programs like the Great Backyard Bird Count, right? Programs like, this is a Christmas Bird Count for Kids event right here that we helped start in Canada. And programs like Project Feeder Watch, where you're keeping track of the birds at your feeder. These sort of entry-level programs where you have to have no experience at all. Sign up for the program, you get all the information you need, you start learning about the birds, whether on your own or out with a group. These are really, really important. This is when you're going to start the next generation of birders, of data collectors. And it's not just the kids too, it's also the parents, right? And having programs where a whole family can participate, I think is really huge. We also have targeted monitoring programs. So we've been doing lots of different targeted monitoring for years. And the value of targeted monitoring is that we've identified a data gap. We know we're not collecting enough data on, let's say, nocturnal owls, right? So we have nocturnal owl surveys in basically all the regions across Canada now. There's a nocturnal owl survey here in Alberta. And these programs are designed with their own protocols to help fill data gaps. You know, another one that we now manage, but that was actually started by Wild Research out of Vancouver, is the Nightjar survey, where people go out and survey for nighthawks, for whippoorwills or pool wills, depending on where you are. And this is to fill a data gap need. They're also an aerial insectivore, right? And it's actually a species that's pretty common, well, especially in my part of Alberta. It's a pretty common bird, but elsewhere they are really declining, and there's a lot we do not know about them. So targeted monitoring is very important. Oh, that's a picture of a nocturnal owl survey here. And if you think that it's dark, So I have to say, like nocturnal owl survey, when I used to coordinate the Ontario Nocturnal Owl Survey, and people always say, like, that's pretty niche, right? Like that's nocturnal owl survey. Like you have no idea how popular it is. Like we have people sit on a waiting list for years, waiting to get a route for the Ontario Nocturnal Owl Survey. And like I think other owl surveys are like this too, because people want to go out till midnight on sketchy back roads at night listening for owls, right? And it's so popular, it's unbelievable. And it's super fun too. Okay. Now, monitoring is more than just like hardcore, like breeding bird survey style, monitoring. Monitoring can take another tack. And we've actually got stewardship-focused monitoring that we run at Birds Canada. And one of the greatest examples is the piping plover program. So we manage the piping plover monitoring program in Ontario and in the Maritimes. And this program is not just monitoring the nest, but we actually have volunteers that babysit the nest and do interpretation and try to, get people to leash up their dogs and walk on the right side of the fence. And there's a lot of education and awareness that goes into this. So we're actually, monitoring the birds, babysitting the birds, and talking about the birds. And then this is just as important as, again, hardcore data collection. It's just a little bit different type of monitoring, but super powerful. We also have lots of collaborative initiatives. I mentioned one, eBird already. The other big one is the Christmas Bird Count. So in Canada, now, of course, everyone here is doing the Calgary Christmas Bird Count on the 17th, I would imagine. If not, match a guy, okay? And I love the Christmas Bird Count. And so the Christmas Bird Count is a collaborative initiative with Birds Canada and the Audubon Society, and we manage this program here in Canada. Audubon does the US. We've got a great working relationship with Jeff and Kathy. They're really great at Audubon. Really great folks to work with to help collect data here. So very important collaborative initiatives. eBird is another one of these as well. So not necessarily programs that we're running by ourselves, but we're working with others to deliver like a more international program. Okay, second last one is multi-species monitoring. All right, so this is interesting because it's the Coastal Waterbird Survey out in British Columbia. It's multiple species, beach bird survey, multiple species. We've got a marsh monitoring program in the prairies and the Great Lakes and the Maritimes, where it's not even just birds, it's also birds and amphibians, right? So multi-species monitoring is another way to collect sort of targeted data within a certain habitat, within a certain region. And it's not just stuck to one particular species. And our marsh monitoring data in particular is cited in innumerable scientific journals. There's so many papers that get published from that data set. It's really quite, my colleague Doug Tozer is like constantly publishing papers with the MMP data set. It's really quite amazing. Okay, last one. We're going to jump away from birds a little bit here. Multi-taxa monitoring. And this is what we're seeing a lot now, right? And we're seeing that obviously in Calgary with the Seeding Nature Challenge, which I'm sure, again, you all are participating in, right? Anyone know what this butterfly is? Quiz part? I didn't think you were going to get a butterfly quiz. Not a bird presentation. Euler's Arctic. Yeah. Love these Arctics. They're only alive for like a week and a half, right? Like May. Oh, incredible. I think you got to go a little bit west or a little bit east of here. Multi-taxa monitoring is becoming really, really big through, and especially iNaturalist has really driven a lot of that, right? But also things like bioblitzes have really taken off. And these are in city nature challenges, and these are really great as well because you collect incredible information. And obviously Weaselhead has this set up as an ongoing basis. So when people are in the park, and you have the iNaturalist app, you can share that information to Weaselhead so you can get a reporting of what people are seeing and what people are finding. It's a great way to easily collect data. It's very easy to set up and run. And early on, this is back in 2017, we actually took this program when there was the BioBlitz Canada event and there was funding to run events back in 2017. We put together this event, Amanda Beekle and I, who Amanda actually lives in Calgary now, and she runs our Key Biodiversity Areas program. We put together the first BioBlitz within an important bird area. And we did major bird collection and everything else. It was like honestly the best, like craziest 24 hours of data collection ever. And this kind of information has ended up being really, really valuable, especially now that important bird areas have moved into key biodiversity areas. So taking those great places for birds, but those places that are really great for birds are often really good for biodiversity conservation in general. And I know Weaselhead is not one of these sites, but Frank Lake is a good example of a local one here. It's an important bird, it's a global important bird area, actually one of the most important bird areas in the whole country, to be honest. But it also fits into a key biodiversity area in terms of the other things that it has. So taking birds and taking it a step forward. And this is a program that BirdLife International spearheaded, and in Canada, Birds Canada is working with Wildlife Conservation Society and other partners to deliver the key biodiversity areas program. So lots of really great fun stuff and lots of new stuff happening within the province as well. Okay, am I doing okay for time? Okay, thumbs up so far? Okay. Okay, so that's a very quick rundown of citizen science and from the birding landscape, what is going on. And I wanted to leave you with a little bit more. I wanted to leave you with going out and collecting data is definitely got a conservation value. We use that information to help conserve birds for sure. There are other ways though, and other actions that you can be doing in addition to that to help conserve birds. So I just wanted to leave you with a few of these here. I wrote on our website, we've got a guide that I put together called a guide for helping Canada's birds. And as you go on, you can read all this there, birdscanada.org/guide. I'll have a link later. But I just wanted to preview some of those things on here because I think it's really important, especially in an urban area like this and the importance of Weaselhead just from a protected areas landscape within a city. All of these threats aren't just for cities, right? These affect birds sort of everywhere we are, but definitely within Weaselhead, I think some of these apply. So I'm going to jump in, start off with the first one, which is how to help reduce the biggest threats to birds, okay? One of the first steps is prioritizing and protecting land and habitat for birds. That's the one right off, right? And you guys are already coming from a place of strength that you've identified and have protected and are trying to protect. this area. And obviously, there's lots of outside influences that make that difficult, I would imagine. But this is really important. Identifying whether that's through key biodiversity areas, through parks, whether that's through organizations like Land Stewardship Trust or Nature Conservancy, supporting these organizations to protect actual land and habitat is huge. You can also go a little bit step further. The link isn't locked here, but I will tell you anyway. We've got this actually great program called Bird Gardens, birdgardens.ca, and it's a program that we put together with videos, tons of downloadable stuff where you actually can learn how to naturalize your yard or your property with a bird focus. And so it's set up, it's brilliant. You just like put in your region and it'll tell you exactly where you are, what your growing conditions are. Here's the list of plants. Here's the potential birds. Here's where you can go get the stuff for every region of the entire country, right? It's fantastic, birdgardens.ca. So it's a really great tool. So people often want to do stuff, right? Like stop mowing your lawn. And like if I see another leaf blower like this week, I'm going to lose my mind. My neighbors, they hope they're not watching, but seriously. Oh God, so much leaf blowing. Anyway, yeah. You'll find our house easily. It's the one with all the leaves in the neighborhood. I don't think it's like this. Cats inside, right? We know this. We all know this, right? 100 million birds per year in Canada killed by cats. Number one human-caused mortality factor for birds outside of habitat loss, right? Keep your cats inside. Build a catio. Put your cat on a leash. Don't give it a collar and put it outside. It doesn't work, right? Cats are not a native component of any ecosystem anywhere in the world, right? They're not native. Please keep them inside. But not the bobcats. Bobcats are good, right? I'm so jealous that some of you probably have bobcats in your yard here. Like, I don't know where I gotta go to see a bobcat, but God, so jealous. Bobcats. Okay, windows. Obviously, you know a lot. You've got an amazing group of people here with the Bird Friendly City Calgary crew and the group that's out there like collecting birds through window collisions. There's a lot of good stuff happening in Calgary here. I just want to point out that this is not just a thing that happens in the city core. This is a thing that happens every house across the country. It's on average 25 million birds per year killed by window collisions in Canada. Like North America wide, that number is close to 1 billion. But in Canada, it's around 25 million a year. And it's not just the high rises, right? You get that number because it's like 3 or 4 birds in everyone's house, that are hitting the windows. And it's really easy to fix, right? You put out markers, feather-friendly tape markers. It couldn't be easier. Buy someone some feather-friendly stuff. Measure their windows. Measure a family member's windows. Call up Paul at Feather Friendly to say, yeah, the window's this big. What do I need? And then give that as a present, to someone. Seriously, it would be amazing. And it'll stop the mortality. You don't even notice it. You can do it yourself too with paracord. And there's a cheap way you can do it for like under 20 bucks as well that I've done, and it totally works. Called the Copian Bird Savers. It's the craziest name ever. In addition to putting markers on windows, obviously turning out the lights, right? And it's great to see information back there about this in Calgary, but turning out especially lights in buildings, especially in downtown core on a migration zone during peak migration period, April, May, September through late October is also really, really key. And if that's not being done or taken seriously in Calgary, got to leverage that more for sure. All right, pesticides, avoid pesticides. This is a good test to see if I actually know what's underneath this. Don't use pesticides. I think everyone here is probably all on the same page with this anyway, but don't use herbicides, don't use pesticides. Give your neighbor the stink eye if they're doing it, standard practice, right? Like just, it's not good. As someone who's worked on species affected by like DDTs and flame retardants and heavy metals, like don't put that stuff in the environment because it doesn't just affect the birds, it's affecting everything else. And the group of birds with the highest declines in Canada, Aerial insectivores, right? Aerial insectivores, right? There's probably numerous causal factors contributing to this, right? It's not just one thing, right? But certainly with aerial insectivores, it's climate change, it's pesticides, it's habitat loss, right? Okay. Reducing plastics, right? So this is something people don't think of a lot with birds, right? I'm not judging, I'm not judging. This is like the exact bottle too. We're all going to recycle those, right? We're all recycling these, of course you are, right? 3.3 million tons of plastic waste is what we do as a country every single year. It's a lot. That's not stuff that's being recycled, right? It's crazy. It's crazy how much we don't recycle this. And you've probably, maybe some, and I don't put this in my slideshow anymore, but some of you have probably seen this, right? When you talk about plastics and birds, there's always this like image that comes up, right? That you all know, and it's like an albatross chick, and the albatross chick is like completely filled with garbage. I don't show that picture anymore because it's so gruesome. People get like pretty upset. So I'm going to put an adorable red phalarope on the screen here. But yet this is also majorly impacted. Now this is a kind of a rare migrant through the area, but you get like redneck phalaropes come through in big numbers, and they're on the reservoir on migration in these flocks as they're heading all the way down to the Salton Sea from here, believe it or not, which is kind of neat. And so that's on the Pacific side, south of Vancouver Island, really important. And a study done in the early 2000s on wintering red and redneck phalaropes, but primarily red phalaropes out off the Pacific. These little tiny things like winter, like out on the ocean for like the whole winter, right? They hate the land. It's hilarious. This was taken, I was up in Cambridge Bay in the Arctic, and this is where this male was. He was just off his nest briefly. This is a bird where the females like lay the eggs and they're like, bye. And the male does all the egg sitting and rearing, right? It's a total, and the females are like the more brightly plumage as well. Really cool, right? And so these wonderful, wonderful little birds, they're hardly ever on land. And when they're out on the ocean, they were studying these birds out on the ocean. They found in the early 2000s that of these populations, there were between 70 and 90% of the birds had plastics all through their bodies, right? Between 70 and 90% of the birds sampled. That's incredible. So this is a bird that goes from like the high Arctic out to the Pacific Ocean, and they're consuming massive amounts of plastic. So it's not just the albatross, right? It's even smaller birds that we're getting plastic, and humans, right? Okay. Taking action for climate change. We don't even have enough time to really jump into this, but I think you all know very well, maybe more than most, the impacts of climate change. And we're seeing it with fires, right? And we're seeing it with especially a lot of our long distance neotropical migrants. These are birds like the black pole warbler, bay-breasted warbler, these are Swainson's thrush. These are birds that are wintering breeding up in the boreal forest, the montane forest, and they winter down in South America, Central and South America. Long distance migrants, and they're brilliant, right? Absolutely brilliant. Like this bird's like 14 grams. It's like 2 loonies, right? And it goes down like to the Andes. You can find them in Ecuador and Bolivia. Like really incredible how far these little birds go. And one of the mechanisms for their migration is that they're impacted by photoperiod change. That's the big trigger, the big hormonal change. I know humans are affected by this as well, right? But with birds, when there's changes in photoperiod, it triggers a hormonal change. And that's when they know, okay, got to fatten up, got to head north, right? And in the fall or late summer, it's like, oh, okay, got to fatten up, got to head south, right? And they use the Earth's magnetic field and constellations to migrate thousands of kilometers. They're 2 loonies in weight, right? Like just amazing, amazing stuff. Climate change is absolutely wreaking havoc, and almost all long-distance neotropical birds, like the black pole warbler, are declining, right? And one of the reasons they're declining is that they are still following photoperiod, right, to know when they need to migrate. But what's happening in the northern hemisphere is not on the same clock as what's going on down in the southern hemisphere when the birds start moving north, right? Spring comes earlier, insect hatches are all over the place, and no longer is that strong alignment there between birds and their food source and their productivity, the number of babies they can actually get out. So even if they get back in time, maybe there's not quite enough food to have all the babies fledge. Maybe it's only one baby. Maybe there's not even enough food to lay eggs. right? That's happening to a lot of our shorebirds that go up to the Arctic that aren't getting enough fat. So climate change is having wreaking all sorts of havoc. Are these birds brilliant and are they dynamic and can they adapt? Absolutely. But not if it's every year, right? Not if it's every single year. And now that's why we're starting to see these big long-term trends. Okay. I know this is a bit doom and gloom. We got to a low doom and gloom point. I'm going to bring it back up. Okay. Become a champion for birds. All right. There are things you can do. This is your Brooks area. God, Alberta's amazing, right? Like I'm from Ontario, but like, God, it's so incredible here. It's the diversity is just wicked. I often tell people Calgary is like the best birding city in the country, and I stand by it. Like it's the diversity of birds and birding you can do from Calgary is honestly unparalleled, right? And I'm like I lead birding tours all over the world, and I'm like Calgary, I'm like seriously. So beautiful marbled godwit out in his old prairie home. This is the only moment it wasn't attacking me and racketing constantly, like nonstop. Like they're so, we'll go with hilarious. So there's two things right here. Oh, does that mean my time's up? No. We're just going to shut you down. We've all heard of bird-friendly coffee, I hope, right? Okay, so I know the logo sort of bears Smithsonian bird-friendly coffee. This is a certification that you're buying coffee from a place that is growing organic, shade-grown coffee that supports habitat for migrants and resident tropical bird species, as opposed to sun-grown coffee, which I don't know, I think it's over here. I'm doing that. But sun-grown coffee is out in the sun, no shade, tons of pesticides, zero biodiversity. Okay. Buying any kind of shade-grown coffee, organic coffee is great. Bird-friendly certified is like the best coffee you can buy. It also supports the locals that are trying to do things the right way, right? So, and it actually, a lot of that money goes in supporting the people that are actually growing it. So can't support that enough. Not enough businesses provide that, especially in this town, right? And obviously none of the big players are using any of this kind of coffee, right? That would be a monumental change if we could ever convince that. So bring it up, mention it, advocate. Grasslands, all right? So this is one program that we're involved in the prairies is working with the grass-fed beef industry and in particular ranchers. And what we're seeing with grass-fed beef, especially if it's certified grass-fed and grass-finished beef, is that the habitat for those cattle actually support like legit prairie ecosystem. It supports all sorts of endangered birds, you know, thick-billed longspur, Sprague's pipit, Baird's sparrow. And so we're working with these ranchers and we're actually creating a monitoring program, which you'll learn all about in the new year, which hopefully will be a bit of a game changer, where we're working with ranchers to actually monitor the biodiversity and the bird friendliness index of their lands. Really interesting stuff. And so supporting, if you eat beef, then you should try to eat grass-fed and grass-finished beef, right? And there are numerous ways you can do that in this province, right? Makes a big, big difference, right? For these, and it really is just replicating bison on the landscape, to be honest. Like that's what those, if it's the right kind of ranch. Advocating for birds, I'm going to start wrapping up here. I can see my clock. There are lots of examples, lots of opportunities to advocate for birds, right? So this is one of the campaigns that we've been working on, and it's been really frustrating, is the development of the new terminal in the Fraser Estuary in Vancouver. Birds Canada has been playing a lead role with that to try to prevent the development of this place, because it'll basically wipe out an entire area of mudflats, including the biofilm that's developed these mudflats for shorebirds, especially these western sandpipers, right? It would be just an atrocity if this actually gets built. It looks like it will get built. I don't know. It's pretty tough. But there are other ways you can advocate for birds. And boy, I think that one of the great examples right here, that within Calgary, there's the Bird Friendly City Initiative. Calgary is a certified bird friendly city. So this is the Nature Canada initiative. Birds Canada is actually a partner in this initiative. And I've been working on that as part of the advisory committee for that since it started. What a great group of active people where you can actually advocate from a municipal level to make changes, whether it's turning out the lights, whether it's trying to reduce pesticides, where it's trying to get CAP bylaws all that kind of stuff are great things that you can do locally. Okay, I mentioned the other big one, volunteer for birds, get involved in a program. And the last big one is, and I think this is the most important of all of these, this is the starting point. Get to know your birds and share your love of birds with others, right? That's where you're going to make the difference. Like you can spout off all the stats, show up all, put all the graphs up there, and it's not really going to have the impact. But if you show someone, a white pelican up close, all right, or actually show them how incredible a black-billed magpie is when you see them in the sunlight, right? It's like one of the best looking birds in North America, right? Or a mountain bluebird, right? If you show someone a mountain bluebird, like, I don't know, like if that doesn't like turn someone into a birder, or at least a nature enthusiast, they have probably no soul. Like, I don't know what more you need to do, right? Because they're so wicked. But I think this is really important. And I think the next step too is make birding more accessible and more inclusive. And I think that's something we all need to be doing more of, right? Make it accessible for all types of people to be birding. Make it inclusive for people from any background, that they are welcome, and they're welcome to go birding with you as part of your club, as part of your group. Talk to your neighbors about birds, right? My neighbor's like really into birds now, just from like talking, and they got feeders, and I'll talk about the birds coming into the yard. Now she's just like obsessed, right? So it's I think this is the starting point. And I mentioned one of our biggest problems in society is our disconnection from it, right? And sharing your love of birds is a great way to help build that. Right? And if people, like we've all heard this, it's really tough to conserve something unless you care about it. Birds can be that spark, right? To do that, right? And if you get that spark lit, then great. It's like do something about your windows, and renaturalize your yard, and then get out there and start collecting data. Participate in one of these volunteer programs, because that will reinforce that, right? Where people are like want to help the birds, and they want to give back, and participating in a program is a way to do that. All right. Am I almost on time? How am I doing? We'll just say I'm on time. Good. Okay. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I made lots of time. I know we're running a bit behind. All the stuff, the guide to helping birds is right here, birdscanada.org/guide. If you haven't listened to our podcast, The Warblers, I produce our podcast, which is amazing, totally biased, right? Check out our podcast, The Warblers. The latest episode is actually about burrowing owls, and we actually have someone from the Wilder Institute in Calgary talking about burrowing owl conservation, the work they're doing. So check it out. We've got a newsletter. We're on social media. We've got a website. I'm also on social media. And thank you so much for listening.